couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't the rain pelting the windows or the wind howling through the gaps in my front door. It was the knock. That single, firm knock on my door at 3:13 a.m. I live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where police cruisers rarely pass by unless there's a bake sale or a neighbor's dog gets loose. That night, I'd already been on edge. The recent string of disappearances had the entire county in a frenzy. 3 people, 2 college kids and a delivery driver, had vanished without a trace in the past month. When the knock came, my first instinct was to ignore it. Nobody has business coming by at that hour. But curiosity, or maybe sheer stupidity, got the better of me. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept to the peephole. Empty. I should have gone back to bed, locked my doors, and prayed for morning. Instead, I did what any horror movie protagonist does. I opened the door. Only a crack, just enough to peek outside. The porch light buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow light onto the puddle-streaked concrete. Nothing. Then I saw it. A police cruiser parked halfway up my driveway. Its headlights were off, but the red and blue light bar flickered faintly, as if it were on its last breath. I opened the door wider, stepping barefoot onto the wet porch. "Hello, officer," I called out. No response. The cruiser was empty. Its driver's side door hung open slightly, rainwater dripping off its edge. I wanted to turn back, to shut the door and pretend I'd seen nothing. But something about the scene, it was too quiet, too deliberate, kept me rooted to the spot. Gripping my phone tighter, I walked down the porch steps, the cold pavement biting into my feet, and approached the car. That's when I saw the streaks on the car's hood, long, red streaks. Fresh blood. My heart pounded like a drum as I circled to the driver's side. The seat was drenched, not from the rain but from something else. Blood pooled on the leather and dripped onto the floor mats, a dark crimson waterfall. The keys were still in the ignition, and the faint scent of copper mixed with rain filled the air. "Shit," I muttered, stumbling back. That's when I saw it. A figure standing under the streetlight at the edge of my driveway. It was barely visible in the misty haze, but the silhouette was unmistakable. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing what looked like a police uniform. "Officer," I called again, my voice cracking. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. It just stood there, staring, or at least I thought it was staring. The mist made it hard to see the face, but something about its posture was wrong. Like it wasn't supposed to be there. The silence was broken by the sound of static. I whipped my head toward the cruiser. The radio was crackling to life. Through the garbled mess of noise, a single word came through, clear and sharp. "Run." I froze. My grip on the phone tightened, my legs locked in place. That single, distorted word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. Run. The figure under the streetlight hadn't moved, but something about it had changed. His head tilted slightly, just enough for me to notice, like it was studying me. Waiting. The air felt heavier, colder. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then it stepped forward. Just one step, but it was enough to snap me out of my daze. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet as I turned and bolted toward my house. My bare feet slapped against the wet concrete, the rain soaking me to the bone. Behind me, I heard it, those slow, deliberate footsteps, the kind that told you whoever or whatever was following didn't need to rush. It knew you weren't getting far. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and braced my back against it, my chest heaving. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. My fingers fumbled to grab it as I struggled to think. What the hell was that? A cop? A prank? My mind screamed at me to call 911. But before I could, a sound shattered the silence. Knock, knock, knock. The same slow, deliberate rhythm as before. It wasn't possible. I just locked the door. No one could have made it to the porch that fast. My hands trembled as I lifted the phone, shining the flashlight at the door. The knock came again, louder this time. And then the voice. "Sir, this is Officer Daniels. Open the door, please." It was calm, polite, even comforting, if not for the fact that every nerve in my body told me something was horribly wrong. "Who are you?" I shouted through the door. "What do you want?" "Sir, please open the door. There's been an incident. I need to ask you a few questions." The voice was steady, professional, but it didn't answer my question. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to hear any movement outside. Nothing. I grabbed the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then clicked. "911, what's your emergency?" A female dispatcher answered. "Someone's outside my house," I blurted. "They're saying they're a cop, but something's wrong. There's blood in the cruiser in my driveway, and..." "What's your address, sir?" I rattled it off as quickly as I could. My voice was shaky, the words tripping over themselves. "All right, sir, stay on the line. Officers are being dispatched to your location now. Do not open the door." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Okay, thank you." But then, the voice outside spoke again, louder this time. "Sir, I know you're on the phone. Open the door now, or I will be forced to enter." The polite tone was gone. Now it was cold, commanding. I could feel the malice dripping from every word. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. "Sir, are they still outside?" "Yes," I whispered. "They're saying they're a cop. They're threatening to come in." There was a pause on the other end. Then, in a tone that sent ice down my spine, she said, "Sir, listen to me carefully. There are no officers in your area. Stay away from the door." The line went dead. "Knock, knock, knock. Open the door." The voice was louder now, almost inhuman in its intensity. The doorknob rattled violently. My breath caught in my throat as I backed away, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. Then, all at once, the rattling stopped. I didn't dare move. The silence was suffocating. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I took a shaky step back, then another, until I reached the kitchen. I grabbed the biggest knife I could find, my fingers white-knuckling the handle. The quiet stretched on for what felt like hours. I was just starting to think it might be over when the lights flickered. Once, twice, then they went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. That's when I heard it. Not a knock this time, but the faintest sound of breathing, coming from the window behind me. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me to stay frozen, to pretend I hadn't heard it. But that sound, low, wet, deliberate, was impossible to ignore. My pulse roared in my ears as I turned, slowly, the knife trembling in my grip. The window was open. Not much, just enough for the rain to drip onto the sill. The pale curtain fluttered in the cold breeze. My eyes scanned the darkness outside, straining to see. For a moment, nothing moved, nothing stirred. And then there it was, a face, pressed against the glass, barely visible in the faint moonlight, was the figure from the street. The uniform was wrong. The badge glinted faintly, but the details were all off. The proportions of the face were stretched, twisted, like someone trying to wear a human mask. It grinned at me, an impossibly wide grin, teeth too white, too sharp. "Sir," it whispered, its voice no longer calm or commanding. It was a slithering, guttural sound, full of mockery. "Open the door. It's standard procedure." My scream caught in my throat as I staggered back, crashing into the counter. The knife slipped from my grasp, clattering to the floor. The face didn't move. It just stared, that grotesque grin never faltering. Then the window slammed shut. I spun around, grabbing the knife again, heart hammering. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I fumbled to answer it, relief washing over me when I saw it was the same 911 dispatcher. "Hello," I gasped, gripping the phone so tight it hurt. "It's still here. It's outside the window now." "Sir," she said, her voice strained, "the officers are on their way, but you need to get out of the house. Now." "What?" I hissed, glancing back at the window. It was empty now, the figure gone. "It's outside. I can't just..." "Listen to me," she interrupted, her tone sharp and urgent. "It's not outside anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway. The breathing. It wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was behind me. I didn't think. I just ran. Knife in one hand, phone in the other. I bolted through the kitchen and into the living room, skidding to a stop in front of the stairs. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I whipped around, trying to see where it had gone. "Sir." The dispatcher's voice came through the phone again. "Stay calm. Find a safe place to hide and lock the door." "Hide?" I hissed. "I don't even know what it is." There was a pause just long enough to feel wrong. Then she said, almost too softly, "Neither do we." The floorboards creaked behind me. I turned, knife raised, but it was too fast. The figure was already there, moving with an unnatural, jerking speed. 1 second it was across the room, and the next it was inches away, towering over me. The grin was gone now, replaced by a hollow, gaping maw that stretched far wider than any human mouth should. Its uniform rippled, like the fabric was alive, shifting and writhing around its body. "Sir," it whispered, its voice a broken static, like a corrupted radio signal. "You're under arrest." It lunged. I swung the knife blindly, catching its arm, or what I thought was its arm. The blade sank in too easily, like plunging it into mud. It recoiled, a guttural hiss escaping from its mouth, and for a split second, I saw something under the uniform. Not skin, not bone, something else. Something black and pulsating, like oil mixed with shadow. It wasn't human. I didn't wait for it to recover. I turned and bolted up the stairs, 2 at a time, slamming into my bedroom and locking the door behind me. My chest burned, my vision blurred, but I didn't stop. I shoved the dresser against the door, every muscle in my body trembling. The house fell silent again. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I'd scared it off. But then I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping at the door. "Sir," it said, its voice calm once more. Too calm. "You can't run from the law." The door shook violently, the hinges groaning under the strain. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't going to stop. My mind raced as I backed away, clutching the knife like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. Then I saw it, the attic door just above the bed. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all I had. The dresser rattled as the door buckled under the creature's weight. Taking one last deep breath, I grabbed the pull string and yanked the attic door open, scrambling up the ladder as fast as I could. The bedroom door shattered just as I pulled the ladder up behind me. I crouched in the darkness, heart hammering, waiting for it to follow. But instead, I heard footsteps retreating back down the stairs. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting. I stayed frozen in the attic, every nerve in my body screaming for me to do something. Anything, but I couldn't. My breathing was shallow, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, and all I could think about was that thing. Whatever it wasn't gone. It was waiting for me to make the next move. The attic was cramped, filled with old boxes and furniture covered in dusty sheets. The only light came from a small round window at the far end, and even that did little to cut through the oppressive darkness. I crawled to the window, careful to keep quiet, and peered out. Rain streaked the glass, and the flickering red and blue lights of the abandoned cruiser in my driveway looked almost surreal through the haze. No sign of the figure. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the knife so tightly my knuckles ached. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, and I fumbled to answer it, desperate for any sign of help. "Hello," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. The dispatcher's voice came through, strained and distant, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Sir, are you safe?" "For now," I replied. "It's still in the house, though. I think it's waiting for me." There was a pause. Then her voice dropped to a near whisper. "You're dealing with something beyond us. You need to get out of there." "I can't," I hissed. "It's blocking the exits." "What am I supposed to do?" Her next words sent a shiver down my spine. "It wants you to panic. That's how it works. Stay calm. Think carefully. Is there another way out?" I glanced around the attic, my eyes landing on the small window again. It was high up, barely large enough to fit through, but it was my only option. The storm outside was relentless, and I'd have to climb down onto the roof and pray I didn't slip, but it was better than staying trapped up here with that thing. I crept toward the window, wincing as the old wooden floorboards creaked under my weight. Each step felt like a gamble, like one wrong move would bring it crashing up here after me. When I reached the window, I braced myself against the wall and pushed it open. The icy rain hit my face instantly, but I didn't care. I climbed up onto the sill, gripping the frame tightly as I eased my legs out. The roof was slick with rain, and the steep angle made my stomach churn. I was 3 stories up, and one wrong step would mean a fast and messy trip to the ground. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and began inching along the shingles, my bare feet slipping with each step. Behind me, the attic hatch slammed open. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The sound of it pulling itself up into the attic, that awful, jerky movement, was enough to tell me it was coming. I forced myself to keep moving, faster now, my heart pounding in my chest. The rain soaked me to the bone, the cold biting into my skin, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl, followed by the sound of something heavy dragging itself out onto the roof. It was following me. I glanced back, and my stomach dropped. The figure was crawling out of the window, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't, its body contorting to fit through the small opening. The uniform clung to it like a second skin, writhing and pulsing with every movement. Its face was even worse now, stretched and torn, as if it were shedding its human disguise. "Sir," it rasped, its voice distorted and broken. "Come quietly." I scrambled faster, my feet slipping on the wet shingles. Ahead of me, the roof sloped down toward the edge. I had no plan, no idea what I'd do when I got there, but I didn't care. All that mattered was putting as much distance between me and that thing as possible. When I reached the edge, I froze. There was nowhere to go. The drop below was too far, the ground a dark, rain-soaked blur. Behind me, the creature was closing in, its movements slow and deliberate, like it knew I had nowhere left to run. "End of the line," it hissed, that grotesque grin spreading across its face again. I turned, gripping the knife tightly, and faced it. My body trembled, but I refused to let it see my fear. If this was it, if this was how it ended, I wasn't going down without a fight. "You're not taking me?" I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my insides. The creature tilted its head, studying me for a moment. Then it lunged. I sidestepped at the last second, driving the knife into its side. The blade sank deep, and the creature let out a guttural screech that rattled my teeth. Black, viscous liquid oozed from the wound, hissing and steaming as it hit the rain-soaked roof. The creature lashed out, its claw-like hand grazing my arm, and I lost my footing. I fell backward, sliding toward the edge of the roof. My hands scrambled for a grip, finding purchase on the gutter just as my legs dangled over the side. Above me, the creature staggered, its movements jerky and erratic. Its grin was gone now, replaced by something that almost looked like pain. It lunged again, but this time I was ready. I kicked out with all my strength, catching it in the chest. The force sent it tumbling backward, its body sliding down the roof and over the edge. It let out one final, piercing screech before disappearing into the darkness below. I hauled myself back onto the roof, my body trembling with exhaustion. I didn't wait to see if it was really gone. I climbed down the side of the house, slipping and stumbling but never stopping until my feet hit solid ground. The red and blue lights of the cruiser still flickered faintly in the driveway, but I ignored them. I ran out into the storm, down the street, as far away from that house as I could get. I don't know how long I ran. The rain blurred my vision, and the cold bit into my skin like needles, but I didn't stop until my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the shoulder of the road, gasping for air, the knife still clutched in my hand. My house was far behind me now, lost in the maze of dark streets and pounding rain. The world around me was eerily quiet. No cars, no lights, just the rhythmic drumming of rain against the asphalt and my own ragged breathing. For a moment I thought I'd escaped, that maybe somehow it was over. But then I heard it, the faint crackle of static. I turned my head slowly, my heart hammering. Through the rain, I saw it. Another police cruiser, parked at the far end of the street. Its headlights were off, but the red and blue lights on the roof flickered faintly, just like the one in my driveway. No, it wasn't possible. I forced myself to my feet, my body screaming in protest, and stumbled forward. The knife felt heavy in my hand, but I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let myself be unarmed. As I got closer, I noticed something written on the cruiser's hood, words, scrawled in dripping black letters that looked like they'd been burned into the metal. "You can't run." My stomach churned, and I staggered backward, nearly losing my balance. The static grew louder, buzzing in my ears like a swarm of angry insects. I spun around, looking for any sign of help, but the street was empty. It was just me, the rain, and that damned cruiser. Then the driver's side door creaked open. It wasn't the thing from before, at least not in the same form. What stepped out was more human, but only barely. It wore a police uniform, and its face was eerily normal. Too normal. The features were perfect, symmetrical, like something out of a wax museum. But the eyes were wrong. They were empty, hollow. It tilted its head, that same grotesque grin stretching across its face. "Sir," it said, its voice calm and polite, but with an undercurrent of something deeply unnatural. "You're resisting arrest." I stumbled back, raising the knife defensively. "Stay the hell away from me," I shouted, my voice shaking. The thing took a step forward, its movements smooth and deliberate. "You can't escape, sir. This is your jurisdiction now." "What are you?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the knife. "Why are you doing this?" It didn't answer. Instead, it reached into its belt and pulled out something that looked like a baton. But as it extended the weapon, the baton stretched and twisted, becoming something long and jagged, like a shard of black glass. This was it. I knew I couldn't outrun it again, not in the shape I was in. I braced myself, preparing to fight, even though I knew I didn't stand a chance. The static grew louder, almost deafening now, as the thing took another step toward me. And then, out of nowhere, a blinding light filled the street. Headlights. Real headlights. A truck roared around the corner, its engine loud enough to drown out the static. The creature turned its head toward the noise, and for the first time, I saw something like fear flicker across its face. The truck barreled toward us, its horn blaring. I dove out of the way just as it plowed into the creature, sending it flying backward. The static cut off instantly, replaced by the screech of tires and the sound of the creature's body hitting the pavement. The truck skidded to a stop, and a man jumped out, flashlight in hand. He was middle-aged, grizzled, and clearly confused. "Are you okay?" he shouted, running toward me. I could barely form words. It's not human," I stammered, pointing toward the road where the creature had fallen. The man turned his flashlight toward the spot, but it was empty. No body, no blood, just rain-soaked asphalt. "What the hell are you talking about?" he asked, his voice sharp but not unkind. "There's nothing there." I stared at the spot, my mind racing. Couldn't have just disappeared. I saw it get hit. I heard the impact, but it was gone. The man grabbed my arm, helping me to my feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of the rain. You're gonna catch your death out here." I let him guide me toward the truck, my legs barely able to hold me up. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I glanced back at the street one last time. The cruiser was gone too. The man drove me to the nearest police station. Real officers took my statement, though their expressions told me they didn't believe a word of it. They chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, maybe even a head injury from a fall. But I knew what I'd seen. They never found the creature or the cruiser. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I've moved to a new town, a new state, trying to put as much distance as I can between myself and whatever the hell that thing was. But no matter where I go, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. Sometimes late at night I hear static, just faintly, like it's coming from an old, broken radio. And every time I hear it, I can't help but wonder if it's found me again. If it's still out there, waiting, watching. It's been a month now. A month of trying to convince myself that it's over, that what happened that night was some kind of nightmare, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion or stress. But deep down, I know better. You don't just walk away from something like that. First, things seemed normal. My new apartment is in a quiet town. No flashing red and blue lights in the middle of the night. No strange figures lurking under streetlights. I even started to relax, to believe I'd left it all behind. But then the signs started. It began with little things. Static on the radio that wasn't there before. Flickering streetlights that seemed to pulse as I walked by. A cop car parked at the edge of the block, always empty but always facing my apartment. I told myself it was nothing, just paranoia. My mind playing tricks on me after what I'd been through. And then, 2 nights ago, I heard the knock. It was faint, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. 3 sharp raps just like before. My heart stopped. I froze in place, staring at the door like it might burst open at any second. I told myself not to answer, to stay quiet and wait it out. But after a minute of silence, I crept to the peephole. No one was there. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every shadow outside my window felt like a threat. By morning, I was a wreck. My mind frayed from the endless cycle of fear and doubt. I decided I needed to get out of the apartment, to go somewhere public where I could feel safe. The diner down the street was almost empty when I arrived. I sat in a booth near the back, where I could see the door, and ordered coffee. The waitress smiled as she brought it over, her kindness a small comfort. For a little while, I almost felt normal again. Then the officer walked in. He wasn't the same as before, not exactly. His uniform was spotless, his demeanor calm and professional. But there was something about his face, too perfect, too symmetrical, and his eyes, they were flat, empty, like he wasn't looking at the world but through it. He scanned the diner, and when his gaze landed on me, my stomach dropped. He smiled, a cold, lifeless thing, and walked over to my booth. "Morning," he said, his voice polite but hollow. "Mind if I sit?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it had closed up, and my hands were trembling under the table. He didn't wait for an answer. He slid into the seat across from me, setting his hat on the table with a deliberate, mechanical motion. "You've been hard to find," he said, his smile widening. "We've been looking for you." I finally found my voice, though it was barely more than a whisper. "What do you want?" His smile didn't falter. "You're overdue, sir. It's time to come with us." "Us?" I repeated, dread pooling in my stomach. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and round. At first, I thought it was a coin, but as he placed it on the table, I realized it was something far worse. A badge. But not any badge. It was identical to the one I'd seen on the creature that night, warped and shifting like it was alive. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly I thought it might snap. "I'm not going anywhere with you," I said, my voice shaking but firm. The officer tilted his head, studying me with that unblinking stare. "You don't have a choice." And then he stood, slipping the badge back into his pocket. "We'll be in touch," he said, tipping his hat before turning and walking out of the diner. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to think. The waitress eventually came over, asking if I was okay. I nodded, paid my bill, and left, but every step back to my apartment felt heavier than the last. Now I'm sitting here, writing this, because I need someone to know what's happening. I don't know who "we" is or why they want me, but I can't shake the feeling that my time is running out. As I type this, the static has started again. Faint at first, like a distant whisper, but growing louder. And there's a knock at the door. This time, it's not hesitant. It's pounding. The pounding on the door was relentless, each impact reverberating through the walls like a war drum. I sat frozen, my breath shallow, the faint static in the background growing louder with each knock. Whoever or whatever was outside wasn't going to wait much longer. My phone sat on the table in front of me, the screen cracked from when I dropped it in the diner. I grabbed it and dialed 911 again, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely press the numbers. The line connected almost immediately, but instead of a dispatcher's voice, I heard that same low, guttural static. My stomach twisted as a voice emerged from the noise. "Sir," it hissed, drawn out and mocking. "This is your final warning." I slammed the phone down, heart racing. They weren't playing games anymore. My hand instinctively reached for the knife I'd taken to carrying with me everywhere. It was a flimsy defense, but it was all I had. The pounding stopped. For a moment, the silence was almost worse. It pressed down on me, suffocating, as I strained to hear any sound, any clue of what was happening. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. They were inside. I stumbled backward, clutching the knife, my pulse hammering in my ears. The front door creaked open, and a flood of cold air swept into the room. I wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. My apartment was small, and every exit felt like it led straight into their hands. And then I saw them. 3 figures stepped into the room, their forms silhouetted against the pale light from the hallway. All of them were wearing police uniforms, identical down to the last detail. Their faces, though, those faces were wrong. They shimmered and shifted, like something barely holding together a human disguise. "Sir," the one in front said, its voice dripping with mock courtesy. "It's time." The static was deafening now, a cacophony of distorted voices and broken radio transmissions. I gritted my teeth, my back pressed against the wall, as the lead figure stepped closer. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that glinted in the dim light. "I'm not going with you," I shouted, raising the knife. It tilted its head, almost amused. "You don't have to come willingly." Before I could react, the other 2 figures moved, impossibly fast, flanking me on either side. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like marionettes controlled by invisible strings. I swung the knife wildly, but they were too quick, their bodies twisting out of the way with inhuman precision. The leader reached for me, its hands stretching unnaturally long, fingers like tendrils. I slashed at it, the blade sinking into its arm. For a moment, I thought I'd hurt it. The black, oozing liquid that spilled from the wound hissed and smoked as it hit the floor. But the creature didn't flinch. It didn't even react. "You can't fight us," it said, its voice layered with static. "You belong to us now." "No!" I screamed, adrenaline surging through me as I broke free from their grasp. I darted past them, knocking over a chair in the process, and sprinted toward the window at the far end of the room. The rain outside had turned into a downpour, the glass streaked with water, but I didn't care. It was my only chance. Behind me, the static grew louder, a crescendo of chaos. I didn't look back. Couldn't. I threw myself at the window, shattering the glass as I crashed through it and tumbled onto the fire escape. The sharp edges of the frame tore into my arms and legs, but I didn't stop. I scrambled to my feet and bolted down the metal stairs, the icy rain soaking me to the bone. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the storm. They were coming, and they were faster than me. By the time I reached the ground, my lungs were burning, my vision blurred from the rain and tears. The alley was empty, but I could feel them closing in. I ran, turning corner after corner, my bare feet slapping against the wet pavement. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the end of the alley, silhouetted by the faint glow of a street lamp. For a split second, I thought it was one of them, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. It was a man, a real man, wearing a battered leather jacket and holding a shotgun. "Get down!" he shouted. I didn't hesitate. I hit the ground just as the first blast roared through the alley. The sound was deafening, the flash of light illuminating the horrors behind me. The creatures recoiled, their forms distorting and writhing like shadows caught in a windstorm. The man fired again, and this time the static cut off completely. When I looked back, the creatures were gone. The alley was empty, save for the black, steaming stains where they'd stood. "Come on," the man said, pulling me to my feet. We need to get out of here before they come back. Who are you? I stammered, my legs barely holding me up. He didn't answer, just gave me a grim look. You're not the first. You won't be the last. Let's move. That was 2 days ago. The man, he called himself Cole, took me to a safe house on the outskirts of town. He told me they're not human, that they've been hunting people like me for years. People who've seen too much. People who've fought back. I don't know how long I can stay here. Cole says they'll find us eventually, that they always do. But for now, I'm alive. And I'm ready, because next time I won't run. Next time I'll fight.